You think she stopped caring because she stopped calling. No, she just realized you were never really listening. And the silence you're hearing now, it's not her ignoring you, it's her healing from you. When you stop chasing her, something shifts, something deeper than you realize. It's not anger, not revenge, and not indifference. It's awakening. Your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. The same silence that once scared her now becomes her sanctuary. She starts to notice how peaceful life feels without constantly waiting, without overthinking, without trying to decode your mixed signals. The messages that never came, the calls that went unanswered, they stop being wounds and start becoming reminders. Reminders that love should never feel like chasing, that affection shouldn't have to be earned through anxiety, that attention given only when convenient isn't affection at all. In the beginning, she might still reach for her phone out of habit, checking if you've texted, if you've noticed her silence. But each time she sees nothing, something changes inside her. The disappointment fades, and in its place, a strange sense of peace begins to grow. It's uncomfortable at first. That quiet, that emptiness where your name used to echo. But slowly, she learns to fill that space with herself. Your absence teaches her more than your words ever could. It teaches her patience, self-worth, and the beauty of not depending on anyone to feel complete. When you stop chasing, you give her the gift of clarity. She begins to see what was hidden behind her hope, the way she was always giving more than she received, always explaining her value to someone who was never listening. She realizes that chasing someone is a silent form of self-abandonment, and that no matter how much love she offers, it can never awaken someone who doesn't want to meet her halfway. So she stops waiting for you to see her worth. Instead, she begins to see it herself. There's something hauntingly powerful about your absence. It echoes in her mind at first, not as pain, but as reflection. It forces her to confront everything she tolerated, everything she accepted out of fear of losing you. But now that you're gone, she sees the truth. She never lost you. She only found how deeply she had lost herself while trying to keep you. The energy she once spent analyzing your words, your moods, your silence, she now redirects toward herself. That same intensity turns inward, transforming confusion into confidence and loneliness into liberation. Every day without your presence becomes another page in her healing. The void you left becomes the mirror that shows her how much she's grown. It doesn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But the distance, the quiet, the moments of stillness, they all become lessons. She starts to understand that not being chased doesn't mean she's unworthy. It means she's finally being freed from someone who could never match her depth. Your absence, once painful, becomes proof of her strength. It shows her she can survive without your validation, without your attention, without your promises that never became reality. It's in this quiet absence that she begins to rise slowly, beautifully, and entirely on her own terms. At first, she doesn't even realize it's happening. The shift isn't loud, it isn't dramatic. It begins quietly, somewhere between one unanswered message and one too many nights of questioning her worth. It starts when she finally gets tired, not angry, just deeply, soulfully tired. Tired of being the only one who tries, tired of explaining herself to someone who never really listens, tired of loving someone who only shows up halfway. This fatigue doesn't break her, it awakens her. It makes her see things she once refused to see. The same words that used to comfort her now sound hollow, and the same gestures that once melted her heart now feel routine, almost mechanical. She starts to look at everything through clearer eyes, and clarity, though painful, is liberating. Her thoughts begin to shift from, "Why doesn't he want me?" to, "Why did I need him so badly?" That's where her transformation begins. She realizes that love should never feel like a performance, that she was never supposed to keep proving her worth to be chosen. The idea that she must chase affection or earn attention starts to dissolve. It's a slow unraveling. Threads of belief she once held so tightly begin to loosen. The belief that being patient would make him stay, that being kind would make him understand, that being available would make him appreciate her, all of it starts to fall apart. She begins to see that her love wasn't the problem, it was just misplaced. Her mind, once a battlefield of confusion, starts to settle into acceptance, not acceptance of loss, but acceptance of truth. The truth that someone's lack of effort doesn't define her value. That love, no matter how deeply she felt it, cannot grow in a place where it isn't nurtured. She starts to notice how heavy it felt to carry a relationship that only moved when she pushed it. She remembers all the times she excused indifference as busyness, distance as mystery, silence as depth, and she smiles, not in bitterness, but in understanding. She forgives herself for staying too long, for hoping too much, for loving too deeply without being met halfway. That forgiveness is her first real step toward freedom. Slowly, the energy she once poured into him begins to return to her. The time she spent waiting becomes time spent building. The love she once directed outward begins to flow inward. She starts doing things for herself, buying flowers not to be noticed, dressing beautifully not to be desired, smiling not to hide pain, but because she finally feels light. The voice in her head that once whispered, "What if he comes back?" begins to fade, replaced by a new one that asks, "What if I never go back to that version of me again?" This shift isn't about forgetting him, it's about remembering herself. The woman who once feared being alone now understands that solitude isn't punishment, it's power. And in this quiet change of heart, she doesn't just move on, she evolves. The same heart that once begged for understanding now beats with certainty, knowing that love doesn't need to be chased when it's real. It simply stays. There comes a moment when everything suddenly becomes clear, though nothing around her has changed. The same conversations, the same silence, the same memories, they're all still there, but she looks at them differently now. It happens quietly, like a dawn breaking after a long, sleepless night. She doesn't cry this time. She doesn't chase. She doesn't question. She simply knows. It's the kind of knowing that comes from exhaustion, the kind that settles deep in her chest and whispers, "I can't do this anymore." Not because she's weak, but because she's finally strong enough to walk away from what keeps breaking her. That moment is both heavy and freeing, like setting down a burden she didn't realize she'd been carrying for so long. She starts to see the truth in all the things she used to ignore. She notices how she was always the one reaching out first, always the one explaining, apologizing, holding conversations that barely had a heartbeat. She realizes that when she was silent, there was no effort from the other side. The connection she thought was mutual was really held together by her consistency alone. Every maybe, every soon, every "I've just been busy" suddenly sounds like what it always was, an excuse. And it hits her, not like a wave, but like a deep calm, that love isn't supposed to feel like convincing someone to stay. That realization is a quiet revolution inside her. The illusion breaks, piece by piece. She stops romanticizing the bare minimum. She stops calling neglect space and stops mistaking mixed signals for mystery. What once made her anxious now feels almost absurd. She wonders how she ever found comfort in uncertainty, how she mistook inconsistency for passion. She begins to understand that love should never require her to lose herself in order to keep it alive. The things she used to cry over no longer have power over her, not because they stopped hurting, but because she finally sees them for what they are, a reflection of someone who never saw her worth clearly enough to hold on to it. It's not that she stops caring overnight. The heart doesn't unlove easily, but she starts caring differently. Her energy shifts from trying to fix what's broken to protecting her own peace. She begins to accept that closure isn't something someone gives you, it's something you create for yourself. That moment of realization becomes her turning point, the quiet awakening that teaches her she was never too much. She was just giving too much to someone who offered too little. She starts to recognize the difference between attention and affection, between effort and emotion, between love and attachment. There's a calmness in her now, one that wasn't there before. She doesn't need to prove her worth. She doesn't need to explain her silence. She realizes that love doesn't fade because you stop chasing it. It fades because it was never being returned. And in that moment, she finally stops waiting for answers because the truth has already spoken through the absence of effort. When you step back, when your presence fades from her world, something remarkable begins to unfold inside her. At first, she feels the void, the heavy, unsettling quiet that comes when the familiar noise of your attention disappears. It's uncomfortable, almost unbearable, because she had built a rhythm around your presence, the constant checking, the hoping, the small sparks of happiness that came with every message. All of it becomes memory. But as the days pass and the silence stretches longer, she starts to notice something she hadn't felt in a long time: stillness. And in that stillness, she begins to hear her own thoughts again. The noise of longing starts to fade, replaced by the soft hum of her own heartbeat, reminding her she's still here, still breathing, still enough. Your absence creates space. Space she didn't know she needed. At first, it feels like emptiness, but slowly it starts to feel like freedom. She no longer wakes up wondering what mood you'll be in, no longer measures her worth by how much attention you choose to give that day. The time she once spent analyzing your words is now spent understanding herself. The energy she used to invest in holding your interest, she now pours into rebuilding her strength. She begins to rediscover who she was before she started shrinking herself to fit into your world. She starts doing things for herself again, not because she wants to prove something, but because it feels good to remember her own power. There's something deeply transformative about realizing she can survive without you. It's not pride or arrogance, it's rebirth. The version of her that once needed your validation starts to dissolve. She realizes that love, when it costs her peace, is too expensive. She sees how she once accepted the bare minimum and called it effort, how she confused attention with affection. But now, in your absence, she no longer settles for moments that leave her questioning. She finds comfort in her solitude, and that comfort becomes strength. She begins to see that her happiness isn't something you gave her. It's something she always had, but forgot how to protect. Every day without you teaches her something new. She learns to enjoy her own company, to fill her days with purpose instead of waiting for someone else to give her meaning. She starts to glow differently, not because someone loves her, but because she finally loves herself. The emptiness that once scared her becomes her foundation. The silence that once hurt her becomes her teacher. She begins to stand taller, speak clearer, and breathe easier. There's a quiet strength in her now, one born not from what you gave her, but from what you took away. Your absence becomes her awakening, the catalyst that reminds her she was never powerless, only distracted from her own power. The change doesn't happen all at once. It's not loud or visible from the outside. It happens quietly, in moments no one notices, in the way she stops checking her phone every few minutes, in how she no longer rewrites messages she'll never send, in how her laughter slowly starts to sound real again. This transformation begins in silence, without announcement or intention. She doesn't wake up one morning deciding to move on. She simply starts to heal without realizing it. It's the small choices that build her back, the decision to stop over-explaining herself, to stop making excuses for your indifference, to stop giving energy to what only drained her. She becomes more careful with her time, more selective with her emotions, more protective of her peace. The transformation is subtle but powerful, a quiet rebellion against everything that once broke her. She starts noticing how different her world feels without the constant chaos of confusion. The peace that once felt foreign now feels like home. The silence that used to echo with your absence becomes something sacred, something she cherishes. It's in that silence that she learns to listen to herself again, her instincts, her needs, her voice. She realizes how often she silenced herself to keep you comfortable, how often she accepted less because she didn't want to lose what little she had. But now she understands that losing herself was the real loss. That realization becomes her fuel. The woman who once begged for answers now finds peace in not knowing. The one who once feared being alone now finds strength in solitude. She no longer seeks closure from you because she's already closing the chapters in her own heart. People around her may not see the change immediately, but they feel it. There's a calmness in her now, a new kind of confidence that doesn't need validation. She carries herself differently, not out of pride, but out of understanding. Her energy no longer chases, it attracts. Her love no longer pleads, it flows where it's welcomed. She's softer but stronger, quieter but wiser. There's no bitterness in her voice, only clarity. She no longer wants to be chosen by someone who once made her question her worth. She wants to be at peace with herself, and that desire alone transforms everything about her. The transformation deepens as she learns to forgive, not to fix the past, but to free herself from it. She stops looking for explanations in your behavior and starts understanding the patterns in her own heart. She sees how every disappointment was directing her toward this version of herself, the version that no longer needs to chase love to feel whole. The silence that once haunted her becomes her strength. It's in this quiet evolution that she truly finds herself again. Not the girl who waited, not the woman who pleaded, but the soul who finally remembers her own worth and the power that comes from standing still in her truth. There comes a time when everything settles, not in chaos, not in heartbreak, but in an almost sacred stillness. That's when she reaches the final understanding. It's not marked by tears or anger. It's a quiet acceptance that fills the spaces where confusion once lived. She no longer looks back with pain or forward with longing. She simply exists in the present, aware of what was, at peace with what is. She understands now that people don't always stay, that love doesn't always mean forever, and that sometimes what breaks you is also what teaches you to rebuild. It's a lesson she never wanted, but one that shaped her in ways no comfort ever could. She realizes that losing someone who never valued her wasn't a loss at all. It was release. A release from waiting, from wondering, from carrying the weight of what was never hers to hold. She begins to see love differently now. It's no longer about chasing or proving, no longer about filling the silence with effort. She understands that real love doesn't demand you to lose yourself. It doesn't make you question your worth or silence your needs. It meets you where you are, fully, willingly, consistently. She now recognizes that what she once called love was often just longing, a desire to be seen by someone who only looked her way when it was convenient. This awareness doesn't make her bitter, it makes her wiser. She starts to see patterns clearly, how she gave, how she hoped, how she tried to mold herself into what someone else needed instead of standing tall in who she already was. That realization changes everything. Changes. The final understanding isn't about forgetting him, it's about remembering herself. She learns that closure doesn't come from conversations or apologies. It comes from choosing peace over explanation. She no longer needs to know why he pulled away or what she could have done differently. She understands now that some things fall apart, not because they're broken, but because they're not meant to fit. She no longer blames herself for the silence. She accepts it as a sign that she outgrew the version of love that kept her small. And in that acceptance, she rediscovers her strength, a quiet, steady power that doesn't need recognition. She becomes grateful in a strange and beautiful way, grateful for the lessons hidden in heartbreak, for the wisdom wrapped in loneliness, for the transformation born from letting go. The girl who once searched for meaning in someone else's eyes now finds it in her own reflection. She doesn't wish things were different anymore. She's thankful they happened exactly as they did because they brought her here, to a place of peace, understanding, and self-respect. She now knows that when you stop chasing her, it wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning of her becoming. And in that becoming, she realizes she never needed to be chosen. She only needed to choose herself.